Hey everyone, welcome. This is Beyond the Lane. My name is Mark, and we're going to be talking about the Carabao Cup as well as the Champions League draw. So, first up, Carabao Cup, we have been drawn at home to Doncaster Rovers, the League Two champions. Now in League One, will be away. So, we also have a young player on loan there, Daniel. Oh God, Ajayi. Sorry. I had to wheel it there again because I nearly said his surname wrong. Apologies for that. So it's an interesting matchup. It probably works in our favour being at home. It definitely does. But in terms of what I was thinking was being able to play them on a very good match surface quite early in the Premier League season as well, which gives us a bit more of an advantage in terms of hopefully a lack of injuries. Always, when you're going to lower league level grounds, there's always the opportunity so that the grounds maybe aren't quite up to the same standards in the Premier League, and you run the risk of injuries on that. It's not to do a disservice to Doncaster's home ground, but again, it's a different setup in terms from the Premier League to lower level divisions, and there's always a risk that you see players get injured. And one thing we definitely don't need to see at Spurs is another injury-laden season, especially injuries that can or could be avoided. So certainly from that perspective, it is a really good start to the cup competition for us. Home as well always makes it easier as well. It certainly means when we're faced up against lower level opposition that we can also be able to rest some of our big name players, especially our more important ones. However, we also need to make sure that we don't do what we've done in previous seasons where we don't take it serious and we throw out a whole field full of youngsters and get tanked. If it wasn't for last season and Jed Spence's last goal, then we really would have been in trouble and out of that competition. So, it's one thing to rest players, but we need to make sure that it's a competitive and strong side that goes out there. And a wee bit closer to the time, we will then do a video that covers match predictions, squads, formations, all that kind of good stuff. So, in terms of Carabao Cup, a very favourable draw for us. The next on the list is going to be the Champions League, which is the big one for Spurs this season, having qualified for the competition despite finishing 17th in the league, thanks to winning the Europa League in Bilbao. So, very good in terms of getting into that competition and into those group stages or group stages. It's a different format. It's a Swiss model for this one. I'm going to read it off in terms of how it works because even trying to remember it and get it out of my head is a wee bit pushing. So, on to the Champions League. We are in the Champions League this season thanks to winning the Europa League and not because we finished 17th in the Premier League. So that puts us into pot three out of the four pots for the draw. Pots don't necessarily matter an awful lot because you can still be drawn against a number of teams from the different pots. But with the rule changes and following a Swiss model for the competition, there are a number of rules in place for that. And the first rule is that in the group stage, you cannot be drawn against another team from your federation. So for us, it means we won't be drawn against Arsenal, Manchester City, Chelsea, Liverpool, or Newcastle. But another rule states that you can also be drawn against no more than two teams from an opposing federation. So the Spanish have three teams: Athletic Club, Barcelona, and Real Madrid. So you will only ever be drawn against two of those, not all three. So there are kind of risks imposed in that you could come against two German teams, two Spanish teams. It's the kind of thing you want to avoid, but it also means that you wouldn't come against three. Probably not as much of an issue or problem for Premier League teams, but certainly if I was one of the Spanish teams or German teams or whatever, you wouldn't want to be coming up against three of the Premier League teams because, to be honest, it would be an absolute nightmare grouping for you if you did. So, in terms of that, some decent news for us for the group stages, but it does also mean that we could end up getting some really bad news in terms of maybe pulling two of the German teams or two of the Spanish teams, especially if you end up with Barcelona and Real Madrid. But it's wait and see because obviously again in the group stages that's not going to happen simply because they all can't be drawn against each other, so you can't have both of them. But It'll be an interesting draw. The draw takes place today at 5 o'clock. I think it's in Monaco. I'm going to pull up the pots for it, and then we'll read through them just to see, give you an idea of what we could end up getting as part of that. So yes, so the draw is going to be 5 p.m. in Monaco. So I was right there, and that's 12 p.m. Eastern time if you're out that kind of clock scale. So pot one is Paris Saint Germain, Real Madrid, Man City, Liverpool, Inter, Chelsea, Borussia Dortmund, and Barcelona. So pot one is strong as hell. And to be honest, I really wouldn't fancy getting any of them out of it. But if you were going to pick someone from that or a couple of teams from that, I would fancy our chances against Inter. I would even take on Borussia Dortmund. Um, I'd maybe even fancy another go at PSG. I think they'd fare a lot better this time round. But again, I'd rather avoid City, Madrid, Liverpool, definitely, Barcelona. Chelsea, hit or miss. I would take them or leave them. It's a very, very strong pot. Pot two is Arsenal, Bayer Leverkusen, Atletico Madrid, Benfica, Atalanta, Villarreal, Juventus, Frankfurt, and Club Bruges. So there's a few strong teams in there. I would definitely want to avoid Atletico, Juventus, possibly Frankfurt. Definitely, that was a tough game for us. Although I think we would fare a hell of a lot stronger this time round rather than nipping a goal and defending quite heavily against it. But again, I would take on anyone out of that. I wouldn't think that any of those teams are better than we are, and I think we would definitely have a good option and a good chance of winning against any one of those sides. We can't be drawn against Arsenal, so there's not even a point in talking about it. Not yet, anyway. Pot three is our pot. So the other guys, teams that are in there alongside us is PSV, Ajax, Napoli, Sporting Club, um, Olympiacos, Slavia Prague, Bodo Glimt, who we know quite well from last time in the Europa League, and Marseille. Again, it's a group of decent teams. I would take any one of them. Bodo Glimt, they weren't as hard to play against as they have been for other teams. And I think definitely even this time round we would be stronger again in terms of opposition. And it gave us a very memorable night for some of our academy players last year in the Europa League as well. But again, they are a good side. Again, though, looking at that list for pot three, I'd take any one of them. The only one I would probably want to avoid would be Napoli. Very, very strong last season. Again, some good signings in the window in the summer there. McTominay turned out to be an absolute disastrous decision for Manchester United, getting rid of him. What a season he had last year. And again, he's at it again this season with Napoli again. So, definitely I'd take anyone out of them out there. But if we could, I'd like to avoid Napoli. I think if we can get past without having to deal with them, I think that would be good for us for pot three. And then the final pot four is FC Copenhagen, AS Monaco, Galatasaray, Union Saint Gilloise. I think I've said that right. Apologies if it's wrong. Carabao, Athletic Club, Newcastle United, Paphos, and Kierat, who put out Celtic, I think. So yeah, team from Kazakhstan. To be honest, I'd take any one of them. Although if I was to put forward a couple of clubs I would want to avoid, I would probably say Galatasaray and Monaco. But again, I wouldn't. I would fancy our chances against any one of those teams. So very interesting teams there. There's definitely a few in there that have the potential of cup upsets there. Um, it's definitely an interesting Champions League draw. It'll be very interesting to see who we pull out of the bag there. I believe then the first fixtures will be announced before the 30th of August. So we've only got a couple of days before we actually will see what the fixture list is going to look like for the Champions League, and then how that is going to affect any of our Premier League fixtures as well. So in terms of Champions League, it's that pot one is mega strong. There's a lot of teams you definitely don't want to get. Probably quite all of them, to be honest. Pot two, couple of strong teams, but again, I would fancy our chances against any of them. Pot three, Napoli's the only team I'd like to avoid. Other than that, I think we'd give every other team in there a really good run. And I would suggest we should be able to beat every one of those clubs. Pot four, anyone at all. One or two, I probably wouldn't. If you could avoid them, I would. But other than that, I think we could beat any one of them as well. So it's going to be an interesting group stage. I think it'll create some really, really good European Cup ties. I think right across the board, not just for us, but in general. It's certainly going to be one of the more interesting Champions Leagues. I think certainly looking at those pot lists as well. And if you're out, you are out. You don't fall into the Europa League. Something we benefited quite highly from last year. So obviously you want to stay in it, you want to get through that group stage and into the stages afterwards. So yeah, with the potential there to get some really good draws, but we also have the potential to get some absolute nightmares. If you end up getting drawn against from pot one, just say Barcelona and Real Madrid, that's going to ruin your day. Pot two, Frankfurt, I think, would be a really bad team to come up against, to be fair. So would Atletico Madrid or Bayer Leverkusen, I think, would give us a wee bit of bother. Pot three, worst case, we'd end up with Napoli. Other than that, I'd like to get Olympiacos and absolutely ram it down their throat for Marinakis. Pot four, worst teams we could get out of that would probably be Galatasaray and Monaco. So yeah, I think that's probably the worst that we could probably get. So fingers crossed none of that comes true. Anyway, draw will be made at 5 o'clock tonight. We'll probably do a short video afterwards, just confirming the group stages and what we can expect going forward off of that one. If you've stuck around this long, thanks very much. Appreciate I maybe rambled a little bit about some of those teams and the pots and stuff, but it's very interesting in terms of the layout for this season as it was for last season and the potential teams we could draw out of that. It's going to be very, very interesting in the draw. Anyway, that's the information we have right now for both cup competitions. When more information comes out in terms of the Champions League draw, we'll do a separate video where we'll do a breakdown on the teams that we're looking at getting and what we can expect in the home and away games for that as well. Thank you very much for watching. Drop a like on it. Let me know what you think about the potential draws, certainly for the Champions League. What's your thoughts on the Doncaster Rovers draw for the Carabao Cup? And remember, subscribe to the channel so you get notified of all of my upcoming Spurs videos as well. Thanks for watching. Come on, you Spurs.